Sometimes when you're driving down the road all by yourself, you begin to hear a voice that tells you need to look around, pay attention. Maybe something isn't quite right. That voice is me. It's the voice of Gord. Hey everybody, how's it going? Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, such as it is wherever you are listening to this show. Thanks for being here. We're going to get to my next guest, Mr. Donald Ward, just here in a couple minutes. Wanted to let you guys know, in case you missed it, I'm writing a book. End of the Road, Inside the War on American Truckers, will be coming out in February 2026. And I'm sure my fellow drivers will appreciate the deep examination of what has become of our jobs in the last 40 years and why things are the way they are. For more information, there'll be a link to my announcement about that from my Substack. And if you want to chip in, I was only able to get a small advance for it. And time is money, and I don't have very much time or money. Lots of people listen to this show for free. If you're feeling bad about that, feel free to chip in for the book. Same. What else is happening? I'll be going to MATS in March. Biggest truck show and industry conference in the entire world. Louisville, Kentucky. Looking forward to seeing you there. Head on over to truckingshow.org for more details. I think free registration is still open. If you missed the mark on that one, I believe tickets remain $10 a person. It's a great party. Lots of people from all across the industry. I believe last year they had 55,000 attendees. Always a good time. Lots of folks from FreightX and Trucking Twitter and all the social medias. Great hangout. I hope to see some of you there. I got a few articles I've had published recently. One at Commonplace, which is the new website of my friends at American Compass. And I had some suggestions for the Trump administration. I'll drop a link there. You guys should go check that out. I've been interviewed recently by Neil Monroe, an investigative reporter at Breitbart. He interviewed myself and another gentleman by the name of Shannon Everett from an organization called American Truckers United. Shannon and I have somewhat similar projects here, trying to figure out what's going on with truckers today and why our wages are depressed and all the safety issues on the road. And unfortunately, we've come to similar conclusions, and Mr. Monroe had us both on. Hopefully, that might even be published by today. I'm not sure yet. It might be next week. Regardless, keep your eyes open for that. I had a piece out in Compact magazine recently exploring, why Trump has been beating up on Justin Trudeau in Canada. Good for Trump. Yeah, as you know, we're not fans of Prime Minister Trudeau at this podcast, and the sooner he's gone, the better we all will be. All right, well, that's enough of that. Donald Ward, fisherman, trucker, farmer, all-around great guy, political commentator. I think you guys are really going to enjoy our little discussion where he tells us all about that stuff and so much more. And as always, any comments, questions, suggestions, corrections, or hate mail, gordilocks at protonmail.com. If you're not subscribed to my Substack, head on over to Substack, autonomoustruckers.substack.com, and let's get to it. G'day, everybody. Welcome back to another installment of the Voice of Gord podcast project. Today's guest, the other voice you're going to hear, is Twitter non-anon. I think he's using his real name.
I am a face account, yeah.
Yeah, you're as the BAP guys might say, you're a face fag, much like me. So bumped into this gentleman a couple of years back, probably a couple accounts ago. You might say this gentleman is one of our guys, working class, populist-ish, and concerned with his country, a patriot, and someone that like takes no crap from anybody, and will always tell you the truth. And seems to have a pretty interesting background. I think he travels a lot for work, much like I used to when I was still on the road. And I've been wanting to get this gentleman on the show for some time now. So please welcome to Voice of Gord, Mr. Donald Ward.
Hey, it's good to be on with you, Gord. I've been looking forward to this for a few weeks now, longer than that, probably.
Yeah, I think I asked you a little while back. It's now Friday, February 7th, foul year of our Lord 2025. Um, I think when I asked you, it was before Christmas, and Christmas holidays came, and then I got the flu, and I've had a terrible cough that only sort of started going away here a few days ago. I haven't really been able to do interviews or really do much in the way of anything because my voice is bad enough. That's the title of the show. Yeah, trying to cough through an interview is not going to do me nor any of my guests nor my listeners any good. So, thanks for your patience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can go work through the Wu Flu Part Two. That's easy to say.
Is that what it is? What's going on? What's your thoughts
I,
on this?
I've had a bunch of friends and chatting online and in real life, and they're talking about an influenza thing that's going around, and I don't know. It's probably just a natural cycle of what we've been going through with these little bugs that are going around. It seems like everybody's been sicker at school. I've got a daughter in school, and sure enough, every 2 weeks we've got a new something drug home. And but yeah, that's the new reality. But on the other hand, there's a lot of good news going on as well. Like every day, there seems to be new good news, and we seem to be like getting five great wins every single day. Whereas in the past, years ago, decades ago, stuff would go take months. You'd be happy that, oh, we had this court case go in our favor after 10 years. And no, we're just keep on winning, and hopefully we'll be winning forever.
Yeah, that was quite the segue, sir. I think you were trying to say that like all the sickness and stuff is outweighed by recent political developments, which I guess I kind of agree with. I guess there's been a sort of like a walking pneumonia thing going on around here. I have two kids as well. Georgia, who's 4, she's in like preschool, and my daughter Vivian, who's 6 and in grade 1, and they all got the flu. My nephew's got the flu. Everybody I'm related to got sick. So yeah, who knows, man? The last few years with the sort of society wide hiding from each other, and then introduction of new and unnecessary high powered pharmaceuticals into the population. Uh, Probably had some effect on that. Anyway, so where are you? So you're on the West Coast somewhere, right?
Correct. I'm over here in the Pacific Northwest in Washington State, Eastern Washington. That's where I live most of the year. Um, I'm also a commercial fisherman up in Bristol Bay, Alaska. So 2 or 3 months out of the year, in the summertime, we go north and north to Alaska, as the song as the song goes, to Bristol Bay uh, to catch salmon, specifically sockeye salmon.
Is that
Uh,
down in the Panhandle?
no, no, no. Well, it's over by the Aleutians, over by the Bering Sea.
Oh,
And
okay. Yeah, Alaska's the only state I haven't been to.
you've never been to Alaska?
No, been close. Been to the Yukon, northern BC. Have been right next door. Haven't been
Oh,
into Alaska yet.
okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, you've seen similar territory, and and Alaska is basically almost a subcontinent of itself. I mean, you have tropical rainforest. You have not tropical, but you have rainforests in southeast Alaska. Anchorage is basically a small city. Up north is Fairbanks, where you have all the oil fields and gold mining. But I'm over to the west, the southwest, over by the Aleutian Chains, and over there it's all about fishing over there, and specifically my fishery, the sockeye salmon, run in Bristol Bay. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. It's comprised of several thousand fishermen, cannery workers, corporations. It has a global infrastructure where our product is caught in the Bristol Bay, processed, shipped around the world. There's huge supply chain issues, all to go get, wonderful uh, frozen fillets and cans at your grocery store.
Right. So that's an interesting place to start, seeing as how, my show is ostensibly about trucking, but, supply chains and all that. So you're on a boat, you're working out there,
Mm-hmm.
you catch all the fish. Are you processing them aboard or are you taking them back to shore?
Well, we're even a little bit more interested there with our particular gear group. There are two gear groups in Bristol Bay. There's your kind of standard drift boats, which are a 32-foot long vessel. It's your stereotypical fishing boat that you think of with the reel and the nets that go out and back, and you go out into the bay and you catch the fish, and you go take them to the tenders and whatnot. We are a different gear group. We're called set netters. And set netters are kind of a hybrid fishery. We're essentially shore based. And we will be fishing. We use these things called gill nets. So we use a gill net. We go put the gill net on a running line. That running line goes perpendicular out into the bay, and we clip the gill net onto our running line. There's 25-foot tides in Bristol Bay, so when the tide is in, you got like 25 up to 25 feet of water. That's when the fish are running, and then twice a day, the bay will empty out, uh, presenting nothing but miles of mud flats. And you hope to God that you picked all the fish out of your net before the tide goes out. We oftentimes pick the net using skiffs, 15-20 foot little skiffs with outboard motors. You can also go pick it as the net's going dry and whatnot. But being a shore-based fishery, what that allows us to do is to catch the fish, catch the sockeye salmon, and then we process it on shore. We have a fish camp. I wasn't married into the fishery. My wife is a fourth generation Bristol Bay fisherman. I married into the industry in 2009, like a lot of guys do. My daughter is a fifth generation fisherman, and yeah, we catch and keep pretty much most of the salmon that we catch, get processed in different ways, and then it is a long ordeal to get the fish out of Bristol Bay back down to the lower 48.
Right. So what's that ordeal look like? So you process them. Are you putting them in cans? Are you packaging them for fresh distribution? Are they going in containers? Are they going on refrigerator? Like how is it? How are they getting out?
Yeah, well, what we do is very odd. Like 99% of the fishermen up there don't do direct marketing. We do direct marketing and farmers markets. Uh, that's how we stay in business. Fish prices, salmon prices, at least in Bristol Bay, have been running from 50 cents a pound to $1.50 a pound on average for the past 15 years. Um, in a comparison, back in the 1980s, salmon prices were $1.50 to $2.50 a pound, and it's like any resource extraction or any commodity-based business, our prices aren't keeping up with inflation.
No. And
The
it's
prices
more
the prices
cost.
No. And the processors, the canneries that most fishermen sell to, have a lot of excuses about why they can't afford to go pay the fishermen more money. The processors are suffering from inflationary effects as well. There's destabilization with the issues with the dollar. There's destabilization around the world. Russia is dumping seafood on the world market. There's an issue with tariffs. There's all sorts of excuses why the average fisherman isn't getting paid more money. And I'm
Yeah,
big
it
on
sounds like trucking. Sounds almost the same as trucking.
it is a lot of the same issues. I'll go take a step back. Um, the Bristol Bay fishery is there. It's called a limited entry permit system. And back when Alaska became a state, they went and essentially gave out 1,800, 2,000, maybe more permits to drift boat captains and like another 1 or 2,000 to set net owners. These numbers may not be actually correct, but it gives you a nice ballpark. So what you essentially have is 3 or 4,000 small business owners that have a fishing permit in Bristol Bay. So every single one of the boats that you see out in Bristol Bay, every one of the set net sites that you see in Bristol Bay is a small business. And like a truck driver, we face a lot of the same issues. We have fuel costs that we have to go deal with. We have mechanical issues. These drift boats out there, they're running the same motors probably that you're running in your Pete or Kenworth. They're Cats, they're Detroits, they're Cummins. They're doing Volvos and out with a lot of the newer drift boats, but they're a diesel motor. We all know what a diesel motor is. We know how much a gallon of diesel fuel costs here in the States. Up in Alaska, our fuel prices have been $5, $6 a gallon, or even more. Um, in terms of getting spare parts, everything has to either be shipped up in a barge before the season or it has to be air cargoed in. And we've had friends on drift boats who've needed a part uh, on their new fancy jet boat, it's an impeller drive. I'm recalling off the top of my head. They had to have it flown in from Sweden or one of those Scandinavian countries, and it cost them tens of thousands of dollars. But you got to pay the money because our season is only about 6 weeks, and if you're not catching fish in those 6 week in that 6 week window, you will lose your entire season,
That's
essentially.
it. Yeah, it's a very narrow window. Kind of like when I used to run the ice roads to the diamond mines in the Northwest Territories. Same thing, roughly 6 to 8 weeks, depending on like how much ice, how many
Mm-hmm.
trucks, how many loads, how well does the ice hold up. Um, very famously, it's interesting. So we both did a job kind of that was like featured in what I call like working porn, because there was like this
Yes.
ice road truckers, and then there was this Deadliest Catch show which came before it.
Mm-hmm.
That's a different neighborhood to you guys, and a different species, different setup, correct?
Yeah, it's everybody asks us about the Deadliest Catch guys, and that's the crab fleet. They're up there in the fall and the winter time, probably right now as we speak. I believe there's an opening um, for one of the species at the moment. But yeah, the Time Bandit, the Northwestern, that. What's funny is that those crab boats, they work in the wintertime catching crab, but in the summertime they're being used in the salmon season as tenders. So essentially, what happens is that the fishing boats, a drifter will catch 5, 10, 20,000 pounds of fish, and then they will go deliver it to these tenders, which are 99% crab boats. So I've seen the time bandit out there. I've seen all of the famous ones that you've seen in in the TV show. And yeah, they will. They'll be during the summertime. They make money by being tenders for the processors.
Yeah, and they actually go to other locations and fish other places too. I think I met this guy down here once. Um, there's a little town village next to where I live called Brooktondale, which is sort of east of Ithaca. There's a little place there called Brookton's Market. I go hang out once in a while, and there's a guy who used to work on one of those crab boats. His name was Six. I thought that may have been like his crew name and not his real name, which I never did find out. But he was friends with some people I knew, and I finally got to meet him one day at Brookton's Market over a beer. And my buddy says, "Hey, Six, this is Gord. He used to work up north too." And I introduced myself, said, "Hey, I used to work on, up on the ice." And he says, "Oh, did you get featured in a pornographic TV series as well?" So like he was in on the joke before I even got to talk to the guy. But anyway, we were shooting the shit, and he said that yeah, those boats, like, they don't just work crab season; they have to like keep doing stuff. Like owning a boat is like not a cheap, you know, it's a very expensive undertaking, and just doing one single season is not going to see you through the rest of the year.
No, but it is. I mean, we're kind of joking about the TV porn, and a lot of it is very now. It's scripted. It's very Hollywood. They try to go create fake drama, and that kind of goes with the territory. But as a fisherman, I am kind of thankful that the deadliest catch became a thing, because it showed to the average American consumer, the average normie, why the price of seafood is the price that it is. It's not because that the crab is worth anything. You are paying for the hours and hours of labor going into catching that crab, into catching that salmon or halibut or cod. It's the danger and the men's lives that are at risk, which makes the seafood the price that is.
Right. Yeah, I have a somewhat different take. I think when ice road truckers came out, it actually ruined working on the ice road.
Oh no.
Um, well, they filmed it in 2007, the very first season, right? And they did it on the ice road I worked on, the Tippett to Contueto Winter Road, which goes up to all these diamond mines in the Northwest Territories. And it came out in the US, and then it came out in Canada. And again, like you mentioned, they sort of turned it into a little bit of a drama. And what the producers from History Channel had done is they did a number of things. So they introduced needless drama, guys like racing each other, being morons in front of the camera, which, nobody up there acts like that. So it's sort of the people that manage that ice road, which is a consortium of the diamond mines and the Northwest Territory government and some other people. They were not very pleased with like how that show came, how it sort of presented the drivers. Also, they used footage from other ice roads of trucks that had gone through the ice and heavy equipment that had got stuck, and talked about people who'd gotten hurt. But that was from other ice roads, not our ice road. And they tried to ascribe it to our ice road, which was factually incorrect, in order to like tart up how dangerous it is, when in fact it's actually the safest road per ton mile traveled on planet Earth.
Yeah.
Because there's no cars on it and everybody's driving slow. So the television show had done all this stuff to make us look bad. And then another thing it did was that it encouraged people to look it up online and say, "Oh, I want to go up north and be an ice road trucker." So the season after it came out, the Northwest Territories DOT would do the occasional, they would come to the Meadows, which is like the sort of check-in area before you go up north on the ice, about 68K from Yellowknife. They would come out there once in a while, ask to see your logbook, just say, "Hey, clean off the lights off your trailer, get all the snow off so people can see, have a nice day, carry on." That became every day. Or they would like pull you over by the dump just before you got into Yellowknife. And also, the fuel companies that were supplying the diamond mines with all their fuel demanded that the trucking companies hauling the fuel have another safety guy, not just in Yellowknife, but one located at all the mines to like bug us once we got there. prevent guys from like turning and burning and going back south and worrying about your logbooks and stuff later. And so it flooded the market, so more people were coming up, which gave the mines no incentive to increase the rates. And then also they put in more needless enforcement on the guys that are already doing it. So like we had this double pincer move, and that probably wouldn't have happened if it hadn't have been for that fucking TV show. And then, well, and then to make it worse, the second season of Ice Road Truckers was over in the Beaufort, up like where the Yukon Northwest Territories meets, because the consortium that runs the Tippett to Contouto Winter Road told History Channel to get lost. So they showed up for 1 year, made a couple of guys famous, and then left, but then ruined what was a good thing for all the guys that were already up there working on. So like I have a very negative view of History Channel and that show.
Yeah, no, and we get a little bit. We get a little bit. We've gotten a lot of that as well. Um, with a lot of the crab boat skippers and crew kind of got big heads once they became Hollywood famous, and they kind of walk big in all the bars up there and whatnot. And then it does attract a lot of kind of cowboy antics where folks from the lower 48 are like, oh yeah, I want to go be an ice road trucker. Oh yeah, I want to be a fisherman up there. And they think it's all, and they think that what's on the show is how we actually do things in real life. And no, in reality, if you're a real truck driver, if you're a real commercial fisherman, you don't want to be doing stupid shit. You don't want to be doing things that risk your lives. I mean, I've been in the water in Bristol Bay. Our skiff snagged some gear. My wife and I and our friend, our crewman, we're in Bristol Bay in the middle of the night with our PFDs floating along for an hour and a half. And no, that's not actually something you want to do in real life. You want to avoid that. You want to go, take it upon yourself to go have good safety procedures, wearing PFDs, making sure your equipment is in good running order and all that. You don't want to be breaking down in the middle of the bay or in the middle of the Yukon. You don't want to be taking chances. You want to do it right.
Right. Yeah. No, the further north you are and the more extreme the conditions, the less margin for error you have. Because, again, as you mentioned, getting parts, getting help. I can't imagine there's a really very, very big hospital in Bristol Bay.
There's a clinic. There's a clinic in Naknek. There's a clinic over in Dillingham. They can go do rudimentary stuff. But yeah, in real life, if it's anything serious, you want to go make sure that your helicopter insurance is paid and up to date, because they're helicoptering you or they're sticking you on a jet to Anchorage. And if you don't have insurance, that costs tens of thousands of dollars just for the flight.
Yeah. Oh man, the costs of doing business up there must be incredible.
No, it is no joke. And everybody's focused on the fish catching aspect, and we are too. I mean, that's the fun part. You're catching the fish. There's no greater thrill than being on your boat and looking at your net and seeing it light up and just fish heads, just heads and tails splashing everywhere. I mean, it's like gold mining. It's like hitting the mother lode. You're jumping around, you're excited because you get a few good hauls like that and your season's made.
Right. Yeah, I was just looking at a map here now. So your Bristol Bay is kind of like on the north side of the Aleutians where it becomes the mainland again. What's the name of this peninsula here?
Well, I'm not looking where you are, but and if you're looking at so there'll be the Bering Sea, so the salmon, there's 5 species of salmon, but the sockeye salmon that we're mainly catching will go out into the Bering Sea or the North Pacific if you're any of the districts in Southeast or South Alaska. And then every year, starting in about June or whatever, they start going up the chain um, into Bristol Bay. And then there's 5 different districts in Bristol Bay with the Naknek Kwijak, where we fish, Igigik, Nushagak. There's Togiak over to the west, and Ugashik as well. And there's other districts as well, but for Bristol Bay fishery, there's 5 main districts.
Right. And so when you're there for your season, where are you based here? Dillingham or Naknek or?
Over in Naknek.
Okay, cool. Yeah. No, this is all fascinating to me, man. Like,
And if you're looking at the map, you're gonna go be seeing lots of tundra, and that's probably just thousands and thousands of miles of tundra. There's mountains and that, but the other thing that you're gonna go notice is a lot of lakes. There is
yes,
there are lakes all over. That's where the salmon are going to.
going
The,
to spawn. That's their
yep,
spawning grounds.
yep. So they're going up to the streams and the lakes upstream from us, and that's where they're going. That's what it's all about. Mama salmon and daddy salmon need to go team up and make a red in the gravel and have their little eggs and babies, and then die.
Man, right. So I'm looking at the map here. Maybe I don't have the roads turned on. Is there a road from Naknek back over to Anchorage, or do you have to fly or take a boat?
There is no road. There's no official road. You have to either get there by plane, and that's what we do. We fly a commercial plane, a commercial, Alaska Airlines usually. We fly up to Anchorage, and then Anchorage to King Salmon, and then King Salmon. There's a little 28-mile road down to Naknek, and then you go hop on an air taxi or a bush plane to get across the river to where we fish, and that's where our cabins are and our infrastructure is. You'll probably notice there's a bunch of canneries and docks and stuff like that in the bay. Those are the processors. That's where a lot of the fish is delivered from the tenders, where they have cannery workers on the slime lines that are sorting the salmon, filleting the salmon, head and gutting the salmon.
Yeah, I'm zooming in here a little bit upstream of Naknek. There's a place called Red Salmon Cannery, North
Yep.
Pacific Seafood, Silver
Mhm.
Bay Seafood, Leader Creek Fisheries.
Those,
Interesting.
yep. There's Trident. There's Peter Pan. Yeah, no, those are your main processors. So for your audience, who are consumers, hopefully, of seafood, you really need to go be eating seafood. But for the consumers, if you go into Costco, if you go into Kroger's or whatever, and you get sockeye salmon, that's generally where 90% of the time that fish will originate. It'll either be there in the Naknek River or over in Dillingham. There's similar infrastructure over there as well.
Right. Do those sockeye come south to like say Washington or Oregon at all, or are they a north fish?
There's runs. There's salmon runs all the way up and down the west coast. So you have salmon run all the way from the Yukon up north, all the way down historically to San Francisco, and there are 5 species of Pacific salmon. There's actually 6. There's a Japanese species, but I'm not going to go talk about that one. But there are 5 main species of Pacific salmon. There's the sockeye salmon, which are also called red. There's the Chinook salmon, also called king, and those are the big fatties that everybody likes to catch and see and take pictures of while they're fishing. There's coho salmon, called silvers. You can go tell them because they have silver on their tail. And then the two, I don't want to say lesser species, but they don't fetch as good of a price. There's pink salmon, which are also called humpies, and then there's Chinook salmon, or not Chinook salmon. There's chum salmon, which are also called dog salmon or Keta salmon. If you go see them at the store.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. I didn't realize there was that many little different variations of salmon.
Yeah, and then I'm going to go throw another monkey wrench into the aspect is there's also Atlantic salmon. So historically, there were salmon runs in the Atlantic Ocean as well that were over where you live, over on the East Coast.
Yeah, they'll come up into the Great Lakes. Well, they'll come
Yep.
into Ontario anyway.
Yeah. So there used to be wild runs of Atlantic salmon on the East Coast, in Great Britain, in Norway, which was every bit as big as the salmon runs that we had back there. But the Atlantic salmon runs almost died out because people would, there's by necessity you would go dam up creeks and streams and that in order to have uh, water mills and industry and stuff like that. And so primarily like 99% of the Atlantic salmon that you're getting is actually farm salmon. And these are salmon that are farmed in pens um, over in Norway, over there on the East Coast, even down in like Chile and Peru. They have farm salmon over there. And as a commercial fisherman, I'm supposed to really hate farm salmon, and I kind of do because it's an inferior product, and they do all sorts of interesting things, like feed the farm salmon antibiotics and food pellets and dyes to make the skin artificially orange and stuff like that. But unfortunately, probably about three quarters, even higher, of the market of the salmon people buy in the United States is typically farm salmon. So they're competitors, and they're also kind of kicking our heads in at the moment because it's a lot cheaper to grow a farm salmon than it is for us to go up to Alaska and then catch the salmon, process it, and bring it down, whether it's us individually or the big seafood processors like Trident, Ocean Beauty, Silver Bay, and whatnot.
Right. So as a consumer, how would people know? Is there some secret code or some brand you're supposed to look for when you're shopping to make sure you're getting the real deal?
Yes, there is. In fact, it's really pretty simple. Is look for the wild caught or caught in Alaska logo. So there'll be um, my wife and I do some volunteer work for the Alaska Seafood Marketing Institute, and you really need to go look for that ASME logo, that wild caught or caught in Alaska logo, and every piece of fish sold in the United States will go have that logo. And I can go get that logo to you at a certain point. I wish I had one here. It's just I think it's somewhat of
Right.
a
No, that's good to know. I mean, I eat salmon. Maybe not as much as I'd like to, just because it's
mm,
sort of cost prohibitive. But
it is.
my wife and my wife's brother and sister-in-law are all vegetarians,
Mm-hmm.
and on rare occasion, they will eat salmon once in a blue moon. So
Mm-hmm.
that's they're sort of if they're gonna eat meat at all, that's what they eat.
Yeah, and it's something that we really do encourage. There are a lot of health benefits uh, to eating salmon and eating seafood, and it kind of actually ties into the current administration with the Trump administration and the fact that I don't know if he's been confirmed yet. He might be confirmed by the time this podcast airs, but the health message that's being promoted by RFK, by Robert Kennedy Jr., about getting better food in our diets, and that's something that really speaks to me and my family, who are producers, and we produce some of the best quality protein in the entire world, we're really quite encouraged by the fact that this administration seems to have a health message and wants to get Americans healthy.
Right. Yeah. I was very happy to see that. My political background has fluctuated over the years. I used to be a card carrying member of the Green Party of Canada. Of all of the embarrassing things from my past, and then I spent a lot of time in libertarian world, as you do when you're a young man. Um, but yeah, the nomination of Mr. Kennedy, it's been interesting watching the confirmation hearings last week and seeing utter frauds like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders completely and utterly beclown themselves in front of the public and say the most ridiculous things, and further cement their legacies as like a total waste of Americans' time. Specifically, Sanders is really, when he was basically, him and Warren were kind of like begging RFK to promise that they weren't going to sue the pharmaceutical companies. And it's like there's so much more to this than just like picking on the guy about his stance on vaccines. Like health is like so much more. There's this whole term with like holistic, and a lot of it's about diet. And I mean, look at RFK, man. Like that guy looks like he looks after himself. There's so many, health ministers in air quotes around the world who one look at them and they are anything but. And so this guy kind of embodies it just in like his appearance. And you know, there's some arguments about the history of the Republican Party, and there's sort of, very cozy relationship with like chemical producers and the petrochemical industry. And, maybe they're not real serious about looking after the environment or people's health, but, that's the old party. This new thing that Trump is doing is a completely different coalition, a completely different supporter base. Um, and I like I say, I was I was a member of the Green Party, and I used to hang out with a lot of like hippier type folks. I would consider my wife kind of that way too. She's a vegetarian for what she believes are health reasons. You could have an argument about whether or not that's actually healthy, but whatever. She's health and environmental conscious. So, and then a bunch of my girlfriends previous to meeting my wife, same thing, and kind of, steered me towards eating better when I was younger. And a bunch of my friends operate in that space. A friend of mine back in Canada runs a health podcast. And, we want people to be healthy, and we want people to be here for a good long time. And, I want, my friend Mike Lombard from the Lombard Trucking Podcast is like,
Oh yeah, he's great.
yeah, he's running Ironmans and stuff, and he wants like truckers to be in better shape. And because, truck drivers, life expectancy is so much less than other people's, and it's like it doesn't have to be this way. And President Trump taking on RFK, if nothing else, just the pure symbolism of it and the energy and vibes that gives to the public to say like, actually, we do care about you and we want you to be healthier. I think that's very good.
Yeah, no, we're really excited, and we sell a lot of our stuff at farmers markets, so we're kind of tied into that crunchy movement, that holistic health movement, as you mentioned, and a lot of our friends, a lot of the other vendors at farmers markets who produce organic vegetables, who produce free range chicken, grass fed beef, pork, stuff that's growing food the way it ought to be grown, instead of in these hellacious factory conditions where a chicken or a cow never sees the light of day for its entire life. A lot of the small producers are really quite excited because we're hopeful about RFK. We're hopeful about the. I'm blanking. My mind's blanking on the other guy who's being brought into the administration who does the soil and the farming. I'll think of him later. But yeah, no, this is a good time to be, I think, to be a small producer, to be a small producer of food, whether it's eggs, poultry, fish in our case, because the vibe has shifted. We don't have to go put up with the slop that's being peddled by Tyson, that's being peddled by these major corporations who we really actually don't know who owns a lot of these corporations. You go to Hormel or something like that, and you start going up the food chain about which holding group owns this and who owns that, and eventually it gets to this obscure Chinese billionaire or something like that. And I don't think they have the best interests of us as the American consumer or Canadian consumer or whoever in mind. They don't care about our health. We need to go care about our health.
Yeah, Roger that. So another question about farming I wanted to ask you. You're in Eastern Washington.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you to give your location away, but you get into Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon, and over into Idaho. There's a lot of potato and onion growing and
Mm-hmm.
whatnot that goes on out there. I think there's even some grain farming.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you posting photos to Twitter of a grain truck that you work seasonally.
Yeah, correct. When in order to go make a living in the 21st century, you got to go be wearing a lot of different hats a lot of times. So yeah, so during the summertime, June, July, August, when the fish are running, I'm up there catching fish. But on the shoulder of the season, I've been working at local farm and that doing you know driving truck, doing agronomy kind of stuff, helping the farmers. Farmer put in seed. So with my particular farm, it's mainly wheat. We're dryland farming. We do wheat, spring wheat, mostly winter wheat out here. Um, Also peas, chickpeas, legumes, canola. We've been doing canola a little bit, but yeah, I wouldn't call myself a farmer, but I'm kind of adjacent to it.
Right. So dryland farming, are you guys using pivots like irrigation?
No, well, actually, yes, but I'm not. That's a couple counties over. The pivots that you'll see are mainly over in like Grant County and down in the Tri Cities and stuff like that. Um, and that's necessary. So they're doing onions and potatoes. Grant County, I believe, is still the largest producing potato growing county in the United States. It used to be that all the McDonald's French fries that you ate came from Grant County. I don't know if that's still the case, but
So Simplot's big out there.
I'm not familiar with that term. But
Simplot, they're the company, JR Simplot. It's an
okay,
agriculture company.
okay. I don't run into them. With mainly what we're doing is with is wheat, in the sense with the wheat stuff and dryland farming. I can go name the names of the corporations that we go sell our wheat to, but it's a lot smaller with the I live in a county that's the largest wheat producing county in the country, but on the other hand, we're not as big in wheat as like over in Kansas or whatnot. And again, like I said, I'm not a farmer. Maybe my boss would know what Simplot is, but I'm not. It's out of
Right.
my.
So the biggest wheat producing county is actually in Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Crazy. You would think it's like North or South Dakota or something.
Yeah, well, we where I live has some interesting topography. It's the Palouse, Palouse. and that it's an Indian word that means hair of the earth. And the geography where I live, it's essentially rolling fields, and the soil is something called loess soil, Loess, and it's basically formed by oh over time, dust got deposited here for tens of thousands of years, and it is some of the most fertile soil in the entire United States. So not only is it fertile, it retains moisture. So when we are farming wheat out here, we are typically getting, on average, about 100 bushel wheat. Whereas in Montana, North Dakota, stuff like that, they're typically getting 25 bushel wheat. That's bushels an acre. So we're getting 100 bushels of wheat an acre over here. I've personally seen 150 bushel an acre wheat, and it is so thick that the combine is barely able to move through it. And they'll go 100 yards, fill up their bulk tank, and need to have a bank out wagon empty them out. But
Wow, amazing. I got the one of my trucker friends I worked for. I used to work for an owner operator for about 4 winters in Alberta, and he was a farmer in southern Alberta, dryland farming using pivots, growing grains. And I'll have to tell him about your 100 bushels per acre and see if he's ever gotten anything like that. Good guy. Couple trucks, probably one of the best people I ever worked for. So this is a farmer respecting account here at Voice of Gord.
we love our farmers.
We do, and we love our firefighters too. So I wanted to ask you a question about when I first bumped into you on Twitter, probably two or three accounts ago, because I've been banned and all that. There was your profile photo. I think what happened was one of these like sort of like smart ass young punk dissident people was like making fun of your picture because you looked a little rough, but then like in your replies you'd said, yeah, I had just like pulled all this stuff out of this town and I was like rescuing people from a literal forest fire, and I'm like, oh wow, this guy's amazing. He's willing to like put this crazy photo of himself up. It looks like he took a log in the face. He's been rolling around in ashes and now he's like driving this truck, and I got to hear this story someday. So please fill me in.
Okay, well, I'll go fill you in on the story. So, being dryland farming, Eastern Washington, it gets hot out here. It's 100 degrees. And as you can imagine, wheat stubble is extremely flammable. And, the entire West Coast is essentially fire country at this point with the poor forestry and land management. But essentially, what happens is, at least in my neck of the woods, is that fire is always a danger. And fires can start either with lightning strikes. We've had a lot of fires with downed power lines. So windstorm will go kick up, and then power lines will go come down because the power companies refuse to go do any preventative maintenance. Rather than putting in new telephone poles, new power poles, they'll just go leave them rot there for 50, 60, 70 years. And this is what occurred back in 2020 with the Malden fire, or the Babb Road fire. It's Babb Road fire, but it's the Malden fire, Malden Pine City fire. And we had on Labor Day, we had 50, 60 mile per hour winds come through Eastern Washington, and it knocked down a tree branch fell on power lines, which landed in stubble, kind of scrub pine, and took off. And a fire in 50 mile per hour winds is never going to stop, and it will just go eat through everything. And there's a local town called Malden, and the residents in Malden had about 5 or 10 minutes to just get everything together and flee. There's no way to go stop it. There's no way to get the volunteer fire department together to fight this fire. It was unstoppable. I mean, if we see the footage that you from Los Angeles a couple weeks ago, it was kind of the same. We go over to me. My outfit was harvesting canola, and we decided to go and pull the plug on the day because it was just too windy and not safe. And we went to lunch. And while eating lunch, we looked out the door, and there's this huge plume of smoke miles high to the east of us. And that was no shit forest fire or field fire. And there's a couple things you can do. Is that you can go home and get our stuff together and flee. But there's a local fire alarm going off.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, it is. Every noon the fire department will go run that. But anyway, so I went. Instead, it's like, well, hell, I need to go and help. And farmers out here, whenever there's a fire, will pitch in. It's not somebody else's job to go fight the fire, although we do have fire departments. We have volunteer fire departments. But whenever there's trouble, the locals will pitch in. And as a local, I went pitched in as well. And I went and grabbed one of our water trucks, is a 84 Pete with a 3,500 gallon water truck on the back, or water tank on the back of it. And I drove to our shop, filled it up to the top with water, and drove drove to the smoke, drove to the flames, texted my wife, telling my wife the situation. It's like, yep, I'm gonna go fight this. If you don't hear from me, that's probably the reason. And then in the small town that we live in, my wife and the women folk were actually organizing the evacuation process by themselves. The cell towers went out at a certain point, and we had very low communication. But yeah, you go drive to the smoke, you drive to the flames. It's very eerie. It felt like going into battle, essentially. And for like 15 minutes, I'm, grabbing gears, trying to go up and over hills and down hills and that. But I got to a little town called Pine City, which was about as far as we can go. And there were 3-4 other farmers' rigs there. I'm going to go take a step back. Is that throughout that day on Labor Day, there were multiple fires that were going on throughout the region. So like the first string of volunteer firefighters had to go and fight this fire. And then the second string of volunteers had to go fight that. So we were down to like literally farmers volunteering and like one firefighter who is supposed to be in charge of everything. And basically what happened is the fire came over us. We were in Pine City. While the local guys, I know Mike was basically, in communication with his superiors upstream, and it was like, we need to get out of here. Let's go. And everybody drove off. And I don't want to say it's every man for himself, but there's essentially one road out of town, and the fire came over us, and it's 50-60 mile per hour wind, and all you see is just smoke, embers, and then big burning things going in front of you. The smoke was so thick that you couldn't even see the hood ornament. I couldn't see the hood ornament on the front of my Pete. It was that you couldn't look out the windows, and everybody's trying to drive down the road, and there's a clusterfuck because you can't see. You have to go drive by looking out I know there's a name for that window on the bottom of the door. So I was driving using that little window on the bottom of the door and lining it up with the white line. And then that stopped being an option. So then we had to stop because you can't go anymore. You'll just run into each other. So I'm stopped in my Pete. And it's like, well, I can stay in the cab, but I've got 3,500 gallons of water on the back of me. And if there's a fire coming, well, screw that. I'm going to go start the pump on on the tank. So I go, park, put the air brakes on the Pete, jumped out, started up the water pump. I looked off to my right, and sure as shit, there is a cop car in the ditch, probably like 50 feet down, that was on fire with the ammunition exploding and going off. So I'd parked right by a cop car that was on fire with ammunition going off.
Oh man.
So I'm not making this up. So I fired up the pump, and I'm kind of in the lee of the wind. So I have at least like 6 feet of like breathable air. And I put the cop car's fire out, because what the hell else am I going to do until things break? So fortunately, my friend wasn't in the cop car. He drove off the road. It caught on fire, and he had to go run and hide in a creek, like way out in the middle of the field, because the fire went over him as well. So anyway, I was doing this at this point. Is basically, I couldn't see anybody else. I had no idea where they're at. It was just me and this cocoon of hellfire putting out a cop car, until the wind died down just enough that it's like, that you can go see for 100 feet in front of you. And it's like, quick, put everything back together, drive off for about a mile until we got in the lee of the wind. And then it was eerily silent. There was no wind, there was no noise. It was kind of a moonscape of burned scrub and stubble fields. And I caught up with the rest of another group of firefighters, and basically I spent the rest of the day providing water for the firefighters. So driving the tanker truck, I would go fill up the fire truck, who would put out fires, and go back and do that. And that was most of the day. And then somehow we made it all the way back around into Malden. We had to go upwind and around to get back into Malden. It's a little town of about 300 or 400 people, and 90% of the houses were burnt down. Everything was burnt down with the exception of a few old houses that had the asbestos siding and the steel roofs. It was just crazy to go see it. Nobody really knew what to do. There wasn't a lot of command and control. A lot of volunteers like myself, we pulled up in our tanker trucks and just waited. And I'm looking around, and you wait, and nobody has a clue. And there's still spot fires everywhere, so stuff was still burning, even though the main fire had moved on. There were still spot fires anywhere. And I'm parked at the city park, and there's a spot fire going on next to me, and everything was burnt down. The town hall, the fire department, the post office, everything was gone, with the exception of a flagpole with an American flag next to some pine trees, which were slowly catching on fire, which would then burn the American flag. And I was like, you know what? I'm not going to go sit here and watch the American flag burn. So me and another guy went and put the fire out, and we saved the American flag.
Based.
Yep. So that's my story.
That's a pretty good one. Donald the firefighter.
volunteer firefighter.
No, man. I mean, sometimes things happen and men are called to action, and that's the action. That's what you did. And
Yeah.
I think that's very cool. Have you been involved in any other volunteer action since?
Oh yeah, that's basically what you kind of are expected to do out here. Is that, yeah, the real firefighters take care of most of the stuff, but you keep your eyes open, and when you live someplace that's you are invested in, you take possession of your town. You take possessions of the infrastructure around there. You care about the town park. If there's litter in the town park, you don't wait for somebody else to go and pick it up. You'll just pick up yourself. But yeah, I mean, there's been car accidents where I've been the first one on the scene and helping out the people until the real firefighters, real paramedics show up. I've helped out with some other smaller fires, but nothing will hopefully top that Malden deal from 2020.
So I would imagine seeing the devastation in and around Los Angeles we saw here a little while ago would have been somewhat upsetting.
Uh, I mean, it was bad out here, and we've had some bad fires out here. That Los Angeles stuff is just a whole other matter. And hats off to the firefighters down there. I don't know what the volunteer firefighter situation is in Los Angeles. I assume they have them. And then hats off to the people who did, the average Joes who did just go in to go help themselves. And we see that even in places like Los Angeles. We saw it. We have friends, I'm sure, who we know who went and helped out in North Carolina after Hurricane Helene, which is still going on, where guys just, well, I have an excavator. I'm going to go put my excavator on my lowboy, and I'm going to go do something, and I'm going to be part of the solution. And that matters. You got to be part of the solution. It all comes down to you.
Right. Yeah. There's a sort of, take charge, local pride, quick to help your neighbors, strain of, civic duty, that people feel in some places that, some people might argue that's lost because of like atomization, specialization, the abandoning things to authority rather than dealing with it yourself, which I think is a very anti-American way of doing things. I got a buddy who's a somewhat famous writer named James Pogue. He writes for the New York Times, Vanity Fair, a bunch of places. He just did a podcast on the Palisades fire down there in Los Angeles. I'm going to send him this. I'll send you that too. You can have a listen to that. I think you guys would be simpatico on stuff. He also writes about like fish conservation. It's actually kind of amazing. I think you and James would have a really good conversation because he's a California guy, and lots of synergies between what he writes about and the life you live.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. Oh, hello, Vivi.
I need to open that.
You need me to open that? Okay. My daughters frequently pop in when Daddy's recording. Whoa!
It exists.
Kombucha explosion. All right, there we go, Viv.
Thanks.
Hey, say hi to my friend Donald.
Hi, Donald.
Hey, good to meet you.
Hey, Viv, lean in. Lean in.
Hi, Donald.
Hey, it's good to meet you, Viv. You look great. I'm glad that you're eating and drinking healthy too. Was that kombucha?
Yeah, like I said, mom leans hippie. Yeah, her and her cousin just got here from school. Yeah, that happens sometimes. I try and record. I was up in the kitchen earlier when they came. I vacated to the basement. But, away she goes.
That's awesome. Well, that's what it's really all about. I mean, you can go have this this artificial thing which is very antiseptic or whatever, but you're a dad, I'm a dad, we're dads. What does it mean being a dad? Well, you have kids and you have to go raise your kids, and to raise your kids you need to go normalize them and get them used to being around other adults. So yeah, that's great. I love seeing Viv there being part of the podcast.
Yeah, I think Georgia popped into my last one. No, it's good. We got kids. That's I don't. I try not to edit it out when they show up. Just hey, man, my children are here. I
Mhm.
record this at home, and like I said when we were before we hit record, like this thing is a gift for my fellow truckers, and we all have families, and you know,
Yeah, it's great that society, I think, is actually becoming more pro kid, which is kind of ironic because we're it's another Trump issue with the population with the population decline and birth rates and that. But yeah, you gotta go normalize having kids in our lives. I mean, our friends who go to church, if your church doesn't have kids in it, your church is dead. You go if everybody complains about kids being on airplanes. Well, my daughter's been flying on airplanes since she's been 6 months old, and she's been a trooper every single time. And the reason why is that we try to teach and we have expectations that she will meet, and she most of the time does. And it's unfair because like in the past you would like never fly with kids, and then all of a sudden by the time the kids get 10, 11, 12, 13, you go thrust them out upon the world and just expect them to know how to behave, to go know how to behave in society. And no, you gotta be doing this stuff right from the get-go. And most kids are smart, they'll learn. If you treat your kid, teach your kid how to act and respectfully around adult, they'll get it. Kids want to please you, so when you go set expectations, they want to go meet them.
right? Do you ever? So how old's your daughter?
My daughter's in second grade.
So she's about the same age as Viv, 6 or 7, maybe 8.
They look like they'd get along as swell.
Right. So when you're out grain trucking or grain hauling, do you ever take her with you?
I've taken her I've taken her with me a few times, mostly the safer one. When I've got 100, and I'm not going to go say the other number, a lot of a lot of wheat on the back, hauling a double. I really don't want my kid there in the truck. Not that I'm not a safe driver or whatnot. It's just that. But with the safer runs, like when I'm picking up seed from the seed plant or whatnot, yep, she'll hop in the red truck with me and drive along. She loves being riding in the Pete's with Daddy, and loves the
Love
air
it.
loves the air horn.
Love it. Love
Um,
to hear it.
yeah. And then she comes up, like I mentioned, she comes up to Alaska with us and helps fish. And she is, even, as young as she is an asset, and we'll pick the fish and she'll go help carry the fish from the net over to our ice totes because, we need to go keep our fish on ice. And she is an asset even at a young age. And there's kind of a lot of thought that, oh, kids are a lot of work and I have to go and sacrifice my job and sacrifice my lifestyle because I have kids. And that's a lot of nonsense. You can go have an active lifestyle and have kids along. They want to be along.
Yeah, no, I was always happy to go trucking with my old man. My daughters are pretty active. I'll be doing something in the backyard in the summertime and stacking firewood, whatever. They want to come and hang out. My wife and I are very cognizant of the sort of addictive potential of screens, and we're always, we're in like a little bit of a tension slash negotiation about, keeping them off mom and dad's phones because they always want to look at pictures and
Yeah.
but
Yeah, I mean, there's a way to mitigate it. And we've held off on screens for a long time, but there's screens, and we live in a world where there's screens, so you ought to know how to use a screen. But yeah, we actively monitor it. And as far as our daughter goes, We like to think that she thinks that she lives in the 1980s, and we're in no rush to go disabuse her of that.
So good segue here. Speaking of screens and knowing how to use them, You're quite good online. What they call a quality poster, and Twitter is the place where everyone comes to talk politics and amongst other things, including the vaunted shit posting, of which you are very very good at, and you seem to have developed quite the following, and you even started your own meme, which is always vet your conservative thought leaders, because I think some might call it Overton window policing, some might call it boundary patrol, whatever. It's just interesting that whenever something is ridiculous and it's supposedly on our side of the street, you show up immediately to point out that it is in fact ridiculous and tell people to pull their heads in.
Yeah. When okay, always vet your conservative thought leaders, and there's kind of a funny story about that. And one of my mutuals on Twitter, Curtis LeMay, did nothing wrong. America's, we know each other, and he kind of makes fun of me about it because I intentionally wanted to go make something that sounded as retarded and boomerish as possible as a joke. And it's kind of like that, but I'm glad that it amuses people, but there is actually a reality to it. I've noticed over the years that it seems like when it comes to right-wing thought leaders, conservative thought leaders, that they seem more concerned about keeping us in line than keeping the left, keeping the libtards in line. And there's a meme about punching right. They seem to be more interested in punching right against us than punching left against them. And you go look into their backgrounds, and a lot of these guys seem to be folks who very recently, in my opinion, were leftists. I know that there's a lot of our guys who are ex-Bernie bros and that. I mean, you mentioned yourself, but it's something different. It seems very convenient that a lot of these guys suddenly become conservative and then are treated with a great job, get a 6 or 7 figure salary, and then continue to police us.
Right. There's it's interesting seeing all of the different little I don't know if it's groups or factions, and like I say, my politics, like I said, I think they're somewhat sort of normie-ish. Um, Again, they've evolved. Yeah, back in the day, I was way more left, and then I spent a lot of time in libertarian world, and then those guys all caved during COVID, or at least most of the big name ones, anyway. And I just started to realize that, like, there's no solutions here. There's no pushing back against the excesses of whatever this regime or machine we live under. I had to adapt my thinking a little bit, but and that's part of the reason why I started experimenting with Twitter a few years ago, and then also because I'm on a weird mission to try and help the trucking industry. Whether or not I get any traction with that, I don't know, but the sort of online discourse, as some people put it, there's definitely, like, within what we might call the right. There's definitely a camp of, like, normies, like regular guys that are good at their jobs and do their jobs and want America to be a good and better managed place and more opportunities for people. And then there's some fucking weirdo ideologues, and then there's some people who unfortunate, maybe connections to, as you say, organizations and places that are not necessarily on our side. And they do the demoralization posting, or attacking the normal people like us.
Yeah, no, and before before I did the farming thing, before I was a commercial fisherman, I I I try not to share it too much, but I was actually also a newspaper reporter as well. I've always been right wing. I mean, I always listened to Rush Limbaugh. I loved Ronald Reagan, and that might get a bunch of people screaming right now. But I'm Gen X, so being Gen Xer, yeah, you grow up listening to Rush Limbaugh and thinking Ronald Reagan is great, but also. But one of the things I've also done is, well, way back in 2009, there was something called the Tea Party movement. I mean,
Oh yeah, I remember that.
you remember the Tea Party movement, and one of my best friends has actually started it. Like the first Tea Party rally was in Seattle, believe it or not. I believe in February of 2009, and she, her handle was Liberty Bell. But Kelly basically started the Tea Party movement. She's featured in the New York Times and yada yada yada. And we all know that the Tea Party movement kind of grew. It got lots of populist support, conservative support, grassroots support. It was this organic grassroots movement. And from 2009, there'd be rallies. You'd show up at congressional offices with right-wing guys like actually protesting, actually getting skin in the game, kind of doing what this was a predecessor to the truck driver thing up in Canada. You're doing activism, and that's unheard of with right-wing conservative Republican guys. And in 2010, we went secured a Republican majority, I believe, in the House and the Senate. So there's wins in Congress. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of suits kind of came in, and it's like, oh, well, guess what? We're Tea Party guys too. And we're formalizing these Tea Party organizations. And you guys go back and do your own thing, and we'll go take it from here. And the movement kind of slowly died and went away, and we kind of lost that momentum.
You might say it got hijacked.
A little bit, yeah. In my opinion, yes, it got hijacked by the suits essentially.
Right. And so who are these suits? What organizations, what places
Well,
did they come from to your mind?
well, I mean the big name that, and we've been beaten over the head with the name of the Koch brothers for years, but it's basically essentially the Koch brothers came in and usurped the Tea Party movement. And the Koch brothers have a lot of money, and they had a lot of organizing power, and they essentially turned, in my opinion, the Tea Party movement from this grassroots populist movement is actually very proto Trump, because a lot of the stuff that we were talking about, Donald Trump went and ran with in 2015 and 2016. So that's who I think is the main aspect, is the main villain, I guess, in that story. But anyway, it's a lot of water under the bridge, but it's one of the kernels, one of the things that kind of inspired my always vet your conservative thought leaders meme, because all of a sudden a bunch of guys would just show up, and you don't quite know where, you don't quite know their background. Their stories are kind of opaque, but all of a sudden they're the ones who are dictating the the agenda, until recently, until until Elon went and bought Twitter, and now we have a different playground to bully people on.
Yeah, I'm of mixed minds about Mr. Musk. Some good, some bad.
Yes.
The It's interesting how you said, these guys just show up. Like there's literal fake glowies, like guys you can see from Pluto, like Patriot Front or whatever, that show up and do their silly things, and they all have the same outfits, and it's quite clear that they're feds. I'm
Some
hoping,
of them, yes.
yeah, I'm hoping that Trump having basically fired so many people in the FBI, we stop seeing stuff like that. there's a woman I'm hoping to get on the show here soon. Her name is I think her name's Christine Radix Virum on Twitter, and she is a filmmaker, and she's been working on this documentary about the guys that got caught up in the Governor Whitmer
Oh,
kidnapping
wow. Yeah.
hoax.
Yep.
That was the sort of predecessor test run thing for what they did to all the January 6 guys, right? This Fed, she calls it the Fed napping hoax, where they basically said these guys were gonna kidnap Governor Whitmer over her handling of COVID and yada yada yada. And it turns out there's like 16 or 17 people involved, and only three of those guys, three of them were not FBI. The rest of them were FBI plants.
Yeah.
So like, I hope that stuff sort of gets dealt with, because the FBI seems like the more interested. You want to talk about policing our guys, you want to talk about setting agendas and stymieing whatever efforts we might put in. I mean, that's basically what the FBI does, but just to normal Americans.
Yeah, and that's kind of the one thing that I mentioned earlier, that's just been nonstop winning for us for a while. That's one of the things that the left and the governments have been very good at, is getting people scared to be involved. Oh, I don't want to get involved because everybody is feds. I don't want to go down to the local rally because there's feds down there. And the unfortunate thing is that, yep, sure as shit, there are suspicious looking individuals there. Even in the Tea Party movement, we'd have our little Tea Party rallies, and there'd be very odd people kind of in the background, kind of saying stuff. And it's like, well, none of us know who you are. Why are you here? You're not identifying yourselves. And then the news media gloms on them. They're not looking at normal people like me or Liberty Bell or the other folks. They're looking at the weirdos who are intentionally saying inflammatory things to go make the entire team look bad. So yeah, we as conservatives, as right wingers, as Americans, are scared to get involved. And the reason we're scared to get involved is because, like you mentioned, the Governor Whitmer thing, the January 6th thing. I've got friends who went there, and they're scared. And well, they were scared, so hopefully they don't have to be scared anymore.
Not being scared. It's just, so one of the things that, some of our friends on the dissident right, I think, are correct about, some of those guys are a little cringe. Sometimes they have some very useful insight.
Yep.
Is that like, and speaking back to like, Reagan and sort of boomerism and stuff, like the fear of communism, and the understanding that the left and other countries have got these propaganda networks, and what people think is reality is not. We've had that here too, and we just pretended like we have this like free country and stuff, and it is to an extent, but like there are forces at work here in the United States that are exactly the same as these sort of left regimes in other countries, and the way they function through sort of unspoken rules about what you can or cannot say, punishments and pressure to conform. And as you said, we've been winning, and seeing a bunch of that stuff get smashed here in the last couple of weeks has been very satisfying.
Yeah, it has. I mean, again, this is February 7th of fiscal year 2025. And so I don't know when this podcast will come out, but currently ongoing, it's Elon Musk and Doge and like 5 or 6 Zoomer kids who are basically completely unraveling this infrastructure that the federal government has put into place to fund our enemies. USA Aid is being mentioned a lot, but it's not just that bureaucracy, not just that department. It's every single department in the U.S. government seems to have, at least in the past 10 or 15 years, been financing the people we are fighting in real life, online, on Twitter, the media. They've been financing Politico. They've been financing George Soros. They've
And the
been
BBC, and like
the BBC.
there was a list of like a bunch of universities in like Canada and New Zealand, and it's like, why is USAID giving money to huge universities in other countries that have their own endowments and their own governments to pay for them? Like, what's the purpose of this?
No, and that's it. That's an excellent question to ask, and I think we can draw our own conclusions. I look forward to, in the upcoming weeks, to go hearing the real answer, seeing it officially answered.
Where is that answer coming from?
Hopefully the real answer will come from the administration. I mean, we have, at the moment, all we're getting is dollar figure numbers, 84, 34 million to Politico, the money to the BBC. What we haven't got yet is the email train, is the email chain, sorry, is the communication between the federal government, between these unelected bureaucrats and outside entities with NGOs. I mean, there's millions of emails of these groups chattering with each other, and probably, this is my opinion, communicating and coordinating with each other against us. And I think I'm going to go take a step back. We all remember the Twitter files last year, or
Right, yes.
2022, where basically Elon Musk, when provided all the emails between the intel agencies and whatnot, working with the staff at Twitter to suppress us, to go personally ban you, Gord.
Yeah.
So we've seen it happen in the past. I look forward to, in the future, and hopefully we'll get it, to go have some sort of narrative, have some sort of story where they explain how members of USAID or USAID, how they're coordinating with Politico, BBC, whatever, in order
Right.
to go throttle our voices.
And I want to see, so there's a website and a Twitter account called Data Republican, and they've been putting out these sort of maps and flowcharts.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of not just USAID. There's a number of other government agencies shoveling money out. And what happens is, and like I think we've known this for a long time, is that there's this constellation of NGOs, non-government organizations, foundations, nonprofits, air quotes, non-government, air quotes, and these people launder money for governments, for major corporations. And what ends up happening is, like, all of these organizations do advocacy in specific areas. They pay for media in specific areas. And then they like pretend they're not part of the government, but they're getting money from the government to then turn around and lobby the government or do work for them in other areas. And it's like the whole thing is actually a government operation. Maybe it's the calling them NGOs is like a sleight of hand. And I over and above the sort of USAID stuff, nuking all of these anti-democratic, authoritarian money laundering operations. Like, as I said, I started off on the left. I went to anti-Iraq war protests, and back then, battle in Seattle, everybody wanted the World Trade Organization and the IMF and all these like globalist institutions to get wrecked and get out of our lives. And all of a sudden now that's not the agenda anymore. No, we want these internationalist organizations to trample your local sovereignty and tell you how to live.
Funny how many things always come back to Seattle, but you mentioned Seattle's WTO protests. I wasn't at the first one, but I was at the second one. That the son of WTO, and then we mentioned our friend Bernie Sanders, who was kind of an icon with a lot of our former Bernie bro friends who are now right-wing guys. But Bernie Sanders went to Seattle in, what was that, 2016 or was that 2008? I can't remember. And he's giving a speech to his supporters there. And then all of a sudden, a bunch of diversity hires that looked like they walked in from the DMV took the microphone away from Bernie Sanders and then just started shouting a bunch of DEI rhetoric. And at that point, I think that when woke up a lot of our Bernie bro friends and made them realize that, oh gosh, this guy who we idolized is just getting walked all over. And I don't think he's the guy I think he is. So, folks like them have slowly made the long march. They became libertarians, they became more conservative or more right wing. And quite frankly, vet your conservative thought leaders. I really dig a lot of the Bernie bros that have been red pilled and have gone through the trenches to go come out the other side and willing to go fight and willing to go, win their country back.
Well, that's better than the alternative, which is as some might call them, the burnouts,
Yeah.
who are the people still clinging on to the senator, even though he's been cucked 3 times by the DNC. Then the incident you just talked about, and the senator used to say things like, "Open borders is a Koch brothers conspiracy to suppress people's wages," of which the senator was correct. And somehow he got told that he wasn't allowed to advocate for that position anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm essentially espousing a lot of my political philosophy is stuff that my uncles and my grandfather, who were blue collar union guys working at a steel mill, working, for Boeing, putting wings on airplanes. A lot of this stuff is things that they were advocating for back in the 50s and 60s, when the Democratic Party used to be for the working man, quote unquote.
Right. Yeah. Boeing. So is that the plant in Richmond there, or Redmond in Washington?
Boeing is, well, I mean, we're all familiar with Boeing airplanes, but Boeing basically got its start in Seattle back in 1916 or thereabouts, and they built mail planes, and then during World War II, they built flying fortresses and B-52s, and eventually, the 747 and 737 jets that we've been flying on. But yeah, they're mainly based out of Seattle, or I should say they used to be based out of Seattle, Everett, Renton.
Renton, that's it. Yeah, because next door to one of the Boeing plants is Kenworth.
Yeah, yep. My uncle works at Kenworth.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. The sort of your family history on the West Coast, and now you're a little further inland and all that. I did want to ask, getting back to your current inland location with the potato and onion farming and all that. In the last few weeks, the president's new policies have come down pretty hard on illegal migrants. And there's a long history of sort of Hispanic guest workers in Washington and Idaho and Oregon, specifically in agriculture.
Yep.
I used to pick up onions at a couple of different sheds out there, and it was always brown guys working there. I'm wondering if the new policies have affected your neck of the woods in that way.
Yes, they have. I'm going to go preface this again by saying that with my particular, the farming that we do with the dryland wheat farming, we're a lot more mechanized and we're not as dependent upon guest workers or illegal workers as the potato farmers, the onion farmer guys. A lot of it still is small family farming out here to a certain extent. And that's simply because you don't want some yahoo to be behind the wheel of a $600,000 John Deere combine on the side of a hill with a 30-degree slope. And that's what we're operating on here where I live. So we're we're a different animal than the potato farmers and the onion farmers. But yeah, you are going to see something like this happen. It's not an issue at the moment per se because it's the winter time. It's February 7th. There is 3 inches of snow on the ground. You don't need as many agriculture workers per se, but it is going to come to a head, and it kind of came to a head back in 2017 with Trump's previous administration, with a lot of apple farmers, cherry pickers, onion farmers, and whatnot, guys who are supposedly Republican, supposedly conservative, but they're addicted to foreign labor. And quite frankly, in my opinion, they're going to have to go and either find another way, or they're going to have to go pay more for American labor, or they're just going to go, or the guest worker program is going to have to be fixed somehow.
Right. Yeah. And well, I mean, we get into sort of deeper economic questions too, like how much is the vaunted consumer willing to pay for things. But I don't think it's that clear cut. I don't know enough about this. I've only started reading about it a bit more in the last year, but it's the sort of financialization of the economy and what they call value scraping, where all these Wall Street guys just buy up all kinds of stuff, and they'll intentionally wreck companies just to do stock buybacks. They'll pump up the valuation of a company that's operating perfectly fine and paying its people, and they're in the black and everything's cool. And then they'll go and they'll lay off 100 people and do this and do that. And then all of a sudden the stock goes up temporarily. Mm-hmm. They make all kinds of money on that and then leave or sell the stock, leave the company in disarray, a bunch of people unemployed. And, there's other shenanigans they do that, like, again, they just scrape the value out of the economy. And then that leads to prices having to go up, and nobody's reaping the benefit of that in wages. No. And so we've got this, it's a multivariant problem. It's not just like paying people more and expecting consumers to pay more. There's all kinds of other stuff going on in the background.
There is, and I don't pretend to be. I'm just a guy. I mean, I hold a steering wheel for part of the year. I pick fish. I'm not a financial expert. I'm not an economist, but yeah, I agree with your assessment there. That certainly does seem to be, at least up into recently, that seems to have been the standard operating procedure on Wall Street and whatnot. In the old days, if the mob would come in and do that to, the local tavern or something like that, that's organized crime. But, if, Globo Homo Corporation comes in and does that to, Remington Arms, well, that's just the free market.
Right. Yeah. It's the the way certain actors work on the supposedly free market does somewhat resemble the mafia. I mean, in having to move on from my sort of previous hard libertarian proclivities, I mean, I still lean that way, right? Like, I don't want people's lives messed with. I think, subsidiarity is a good thing, like solving problems at the smallest, most local level possible to solve them is a good thing. Like the sort of like small scale farming, small scale business, you should generally be left alone. But what happens is everything gets worse with scale. And, the sort of libertarian types, again, as I said before, they drop the ball, the institutional ones. I don't mean like regular, normal libertarian people. I mean, like guys like Reason and the Cato Institute, they lied down and took it during COVID. And they also don't seem to understand that corporations are basically arms of the state now. And that, trying to force everybody to compete with the rest of the world, where the rest of the world doesn't play by the sort of same rules and cultural ways that we do, that ain't going to compute,
No. Well, I mean, I married a Ron Paul libertarian.
Good for you.
Yeah. So, we love Ron Paul, and but and I'll point out, guess who, I won't say part of the administration, but guess who's been helping out with the administration? Ron Paul. Ron Paul has been a good friend to the Trump administration so far. And I think it's important to keep the good things with the Libertarian Party, and we don't need the other stuff. And I don't want to go trash the Libertarian Party because there's a lot of goofy stuff that's been going on recently over the past couple years. But yeah, no, we have an interesting coalition at the moment with the Trump administration, with your standard boomer cons. You have a lot of DC people who've sort of bent the knee, like Marco Rubio and Ted Cruz. You have grassroots folks. You have like yourself, former Green Party guy who's seen the light, and then you have folks like RFK and Tulsi Gabbard, and we're all kind of part of this big coalition. And it's a nice place to be in at the moment because we have shed the people that we don't need at the moment.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting. Another one of our guys, a fellow on Twitter by the name of Jr. Real John Dios, good guy over in Connecticut, and he's involved in some local politics where he lives. And I'm involved in a group chat with him, and he's the sort of dude that like understands the coalition stuff. Like he extends olive branches to people that were may have been antagonistic. Like he gets it. He's like, hey man, RFK's on board. Trump should give RFK what RFK wants. Tulsi's on board. Great. Tulsi brought us voters. Give Tulsi what Tulsi wants. Give her a position. Like it's the sort of patronage politics that like the good old boys talk about, like we are all part of the group now. We all help each other out. Right.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like to say that steel sharpens steel. It is good to go have disagreements. It is good to go argue about how to make something better. We're not just brainless, automatrons who are following Trump. And well, maybe some folks are, but certainly not me. I'm not a Trump follower. I hired Trump. I hired Trump to go do a job. And so far, me as Trump's employer, I'm happy with the job so far.
That's a great way of putting it. We collectively hired a guy. That's basically what we've done.
Yeah, this is what Republicans have been kind of doing for a while. I was in 2000 when I voted for George W. Bush. I voted for George W. Bush to go do a certain job, and he didn't do it. And similarly with a lot of other Republicans in the past. But again, these are elected officials. They're representative. It might sound old-fashioned. It might seem naive, but we as the group, we're the boss. We are asking them, we're telling them to go accomplish these tasks. 777 million Americans and 312 electors want Donald Trump and his administration to go do these tasks.
And so far, he's been doing them very, very quickly and with pizzazz.
Yeah. And when they get out of line, as we've seen, when, this is before the administration started back in Christmas, when, again, I like Elon Musk, but we kind of need to go keep a tight leash on him. But when Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy went and spouted off on Twitter on Christmas, I'm trying to recall exactly what Vivek said, but he's basically describing Americans as being lazy for not working 80 hours a week. And he said that we were a bunch of jocks who spent all of our time watching Saved by the Bell. What happened is that, using Twitter, we were able to make our voices known and beat him into submission to the point that he got kicked out of the Trump administration. And this is great. This is great what the website known as Twitter X has become. It's like instant opinion polling. And the Trump administration and Elon Musk has all this data from hundreds of thousands and millions of us typing on Twitter every day saying, yeah, I like this executive order. Yeah, I like that executive order. No, I don't like the fact that Doge went and fired that one Zoomer kid because the Wall Street Journal went and did a hit piece on them. We are able to go communicate with our elected officials in a way that's never been done before. We didn't have this tool available to us in 2016, in 2010, during the Bush administration. This is a whole new ballgame where we're allowed to make our voices heard, and damn it, they seem to be listening to us.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Again, retail patronage politics that seems to actually be working for the average person. Too bad for the people whose hair is on fire over this. I remember when Trump won the first time, and I was still on Facebook. I said something like, "Everybody loves democracy, and until they don't." All right, like. Yep. All these people who've been raving and raging and ranting about, democratic norms and Trump is this and Trump is that. Well, he got a mandate. He's executing what his voters wanted him to do. Isn't that like what government's supposed to do? Is that not what is that not what you guys advocate for? If you guys win, come on.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it really is just as simple as voting your way out of the problem. And again, I'm naive. I am so optimistic. I am by nature an optimistic individual. I might not always come across that way with the shit posting I do, but I'm always forward looking. And, sometimes it's just a matter of, loving your country, loving your family, waving Old Glory, having a flag outside your house, and just presenting hope and optimism and a good plan for your future. Because this isn't just about me. This is about my daughter. It's about your daughter, Viv, and it's about their children in the future.
Yeah, amen to that, sir. Yeah, one of the things I don't like is the short-term thinking that goes on with so many of the people that claim to manage our society, and I don't see them thinking about what's gonna be left here for my daughters and their kids and your daughter and everyone else's children. So I'm glad that we're able to turn the ship around. Donald, you've been very generous with your time. It's almost 2 hours here. I think we could go on forever. I hate to kick you off, but I gotta go upstairs and deal with kiddos. So
this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me on. And whenever you need me to go stop by again, I will be more than happy to drop everything and talk to you. Unless I'm fishing and I'm not dropping the net then.
Right. Well, I'm gonna be tied up for a few months working on this book, but dude, maybe I'll come fishing with you one day. I've never been to Alaska, and maybe you guys are my entry point to keep me out of trouble if I go up there.
We'll fry up a fish for you when you get there.
All right. Well, everybody, Donald Ward, him on Twitter as Ward of the States, fisherman, trucker, firefighter, Renaissance man, highly in tune political commentator, and enforcer of the Overton window for Our Guys trademark. Thank you so much for your time, sir.
Thank you.
All right, way of the road.